If you're over 40 and you're feeling like your energy, your strength, your vitality, your drive isn't what it used to, perhaps you're considering testosterone replacement. Maybe you're even on it. You've looked into it. You're considering what happens if you go on it and then you have to stop. I've been there. My testosterone was in the low 500s when I was 60, and that's not bad and actually pretty good. Better than a lot of men decades younger than that. But I felt like I was slowing down. And at the time, I had a family practice client that was doing bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. And over a couple of years, I kept hearing how great it was, and I eventually decided to give TRT a try. So I started testosterone replacement therapy, and it worked. And it worked great. I got to admit, I got lean. I got strong. My energy went up. My libido rose. And I felt amazing until I had to come off of it. And what happened next was not a smooth transition. It wasn't fun. It was one of the hardest years of my life, the hardest time I've ever experienced physically, emotionally, energetically, mentally. That year, 2022, was a year of hell. I often describe it as like I was moving through quicksand through that year. And it led me to implementing the practices that I use today that help me raise my testosterone from the 300s into the 700s without going back on TRT. And in this video, I'm going to share why I came off TRT, how it negatively impacted my physical and mental health, and what I did to get my testosterone back into the 700s without going back on it. That's higher than it was before I went on TRT. Hi, I'm Dr. Bill Berkowitz. I'm a chiropractor with over 40 years of clinical practice and advanced training in functional medicine. My work is built on one simple truth, that the human body is engineered to express robust and vibrant health when the conditions are right. I work primarily with men and women in midlife who are dealing with low energy, declining libido, poor sleep, weight gain, all the hallmarks of metabolic decline. And they're frustrated because they don't want to deal with a medical system that's focused on symptom management rather than the restoration of function. I help people rebuild their metabolism, restore circadian and nervous system rhythms, and realign with the biological signals that the body requires to express health. You see, you can't heal in the same environment or the same conditions that created the problem that you're experiencing. This channel is about returning to biological truth. Subscribe if you want to learn more about how metabolism, hormones, light, timing, and daily environment impact your health, and how small, practical changes can restore energy, clarity, and vitality. You see, health is so much simpler than you've been led to believe. My testosterone levels were pretty decent before I went on TRT, in the low 500s, much better than a lot of men my age and better than men decades younger. Yet I was feeling the impact of declining T, and there was this allure of returning to historical levels of hormones. I was experiencing low energy, decreased focus, declining libido. I had difficulty putting muscle on, and it was much easier to put fat on. I was feeling the impact of what most people would call aging. And I was forever looking for that edge. I was looking for it in exercise, sleep, diet, supplements, and what's become called biohacking. At the time, I was training physicians to deliver a ketogenic diet to address metabolic syndrome and weight loss. Metabolic syndrome is that constellation of hypertension, insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, elevated triglycerides, low HDL cholesterol, and central obesity or belly fat. And a client of mine, a family practice MD, started to implement bioidentical hormones into his practice. And all I heard from him, his wife, and his female staff was how amazing it was. Even the women who were getting low-level testosterone replacements couldn't stop telling me how great they felt, better than they had in years, from improved sleep to improved energy to better libido. So I started doing my own research. I started looking into TRT, what it was, what the rationale was. Was it safe? Did it make sense? The argument was compelling. The argument is, why not return yourself to your hormone levels when you were at your peak physiologically, emotionally, mentally? That you were never better than when your hormones were optimal. It made sense. And it didn't feel in conflict with my philosophy of seeking optimal function in my body. Bioidentical hormones, they felt safe. There didn't seem to be a risk. It was in line. There was nothing really in conflict at the time. And so I choose the pellet route for hormone replacement. I only had to get testosterone pellets every 3 to 4 months or so. It did mean a doctor's visit 3 or 4 times a year. And I had 3 or 4 days at least of pretty good discomfort following the injection. But I got to admit, the results were powerful. I experienced increased energy, better focus. My workouts were better. I got leaner. I put on muscle. I was leaner than I was in 25 years. My libido climbed. I felt amazing. But in order to get those results, remember I started at 500s, we had to achieve a super physiological level of testosterone. Looking back, I think it was absolute crazy because I just pulled my old labs up from that period of time. And from 2019 to 2021, my total T ranged from 960 to 2288, which is absurd. And my free T from 127 to 532. These are absurdly high numbers, even for a young man. Yep, TRT did its job. I felt great, physically, emotionally. And yet I wondered about the wisdom of being on hormones for the rest of my life. And I worried about what would happen if I had to or chose to get off of hormones. What about my suppression of my own ability to produce testosterone? What would happen if I wanted to or had to go it off? And then the unexpected happened. I got a high prostate specific antigen test, a PSA test. And I had to explore that, and I had to go stop the TRT. I underwent an MRI and a biopsy, and I had to do all of that before considering resuming TRT. And there were conflicting opinions about the wisdom of testosterone replacement with a prostate issue. So eventually, I chose not to go back on TRT as I sorted out my prostate issue. But what happened is I found myself in one huge funk when my teeth crashed. I wasn't even thinking of going back on. How I felt was devastating. I felt emotionally flat, depressed. My energy crashed. My focus was poor. My libido was nowhere. I gained 15 to 20 pounds of fat in that year. My total T, as far as I can tell, went down to 377. I'm sure it crashed lower, but I don't know I have labs to document that. It was a rough year. I often describe it as a year that I felt like I was moving through quicksand. Nothing was easy. It was a struggle. And it was only after that that I realized that it was low T that was responsible for how I was feeling. And that's what motivated me to realize that I had to change something deeper, something that was driving the low T. TRT wasn't the solution, so I started researching metabolic health. Declining testosterone has been going on population-wise over the last 30 to 40 years. And I asked, what's changed? Why are men today have lower testosterone than 30, 40 years ago? And so I looked at this through an ancestral or evolutionary lens. I looked at how we've lived for generations and what health principles have we violated in order to get to this place of low testosterone. And it motivated me to uncover the causes of not just low T, but metabolic decline. And during that time of TRT, I'd also been taking thyroid hormones. And this is also related to this whole thing. So I looked at what was causing this population decline in metabolic health. Explored why testosterone and why overall metabolic health were declining. And I realized it came down to environment and lifestyle. And so I started to implement daily and weekly rhythms and strategies, daily and weekly practices to improve my metabolic health. And I continue to refine those practices to today. The body works on rhythms, and the most powerful rhythm is the 24-hour cycle that we call the circadian rhythm. And some of what I've done is this. I prioritize getting high quality protein, grass fed, pasture raised ruminant animals. I prioritized high quality animal fat from grass fed, pasture raised animals. And I prioritized getting cholesterol. I wasn't afraid of cholesterol. I got my leptin and insulin levels low, my blood glucose levels low. I worked out with resistance training to build muscle and to stimulate protein synthesis and muscle growth. I took care of my circadian rhythm. I paid attention to light, wake, sleep. They became my priority on a day-to-day basis. And I prioritized high-quality light from the sun. I controlled my exposure to artificial light during different times of the day. And what happened? I began to feel amazing. My energy went up. My sleep improved. My libido got better. I got stronger and leaner than I have in years. And I continue to keep these daily rhythms and practices and continue to refine them month by month as I learn more about metabolic health. My energy and emotional state is better than it's been in years. And I want to emphasize this is a process, it's not a quick fix. Most people in our culture view health as an event. They're looking for that quick fix. TRT is, in a sense, that quick fix. Get an injection, raise your hormones back to where they were years ago. But anything that supports your long-term health, your long-term metabolic health, is something that needs to be repeated daily and weekly through your life. So what happened? I did blood lab work. I did DEXA scans. My inflammation on my lab tests through CRP, C-reactive protein, is extremely low. My fasting glucose and insulin are incredibly low. My testosterone has climbed consistently from 377 in October 22 to 519 in June 23, 662 in August 25, and 718 in December 25. My visceral fat is low. My lean mass is up. I now understand that metabolic health is directly related to how we live. I now know that testosterone and thyroid and other hormones, insulin and inflammation are all impacted by the choices we make every single day. And this experience has drastically changed my view how powerfully we can impact our health, our metabolic health, our hormonal health, every aspect of our health with the choices that we make every single day. You have the power to take back sovereignty over your health. This has empowered me, and it can empower you. What I hope is that my story has showed you another path out of the quick fix mentality, a path that says that your testosterone can be restored naturally, not just replaced artificially. Not many men realize this. And that's why I've made it my mission to help men understand how to support their own biology instead of overriding it with medications and hormones. And in upcoming videos, I'm going to dive deeper into how to raise your testosterone naturally, share more of what I did. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss those videos. You're also going to learn how metabolism, hormones, light, timing, and daily environment shape your health and how small practical changes can restore clarity, energy, and vitality. Because health is so much simpler than you've been led to believe. Now, if you want to take the next step, you need to understand what may be quietly suppressing your testosterone without you even knowing it. That's exactly what I'm going to go over in this next video. So go watch that video next.